Well, Michael Gove is here with me. So much to talk about.
Absolutely.
Michael.
Can I say, first of all, thank you for calling me the Minister for Newsnight, because the one thing I would say is that if I am responsible for Newsnight, I am responsible for at least one success story over the last couple of years.
Right. Let's just start. A quick reaction. I know you haven't had time to reflect on it, that Labour basically taking on the non-Doms and leaving you as the party supporting rich foreigners.
Well, it was made clear, wasn't it, by Allegra, that Labour are spinning this as a technique, a tactic, in order to try to paint us into a particular corner. Let's look at the policy tomorrow, when I think it's going to be revealed in all its detail. I think the first thing to ask is, will this actually contribute more money to the Exchequer? Because I'm interested in taxation policy that genuinely makes sure that those people who do have more can effectively be taxed, that we can get the maximum out of them in the most effective way. So let's see, because my understanding is that Labour have been, when questioned about this during the course of this evening, incapable of saying how much money this tax would raise. Indeed, there's some suggestions, actually, that this could lead to a flight of talent and a flight of cash from this country, and the Exchequer could be worse off. Let's see.
Right. OK, so that's going to be the way the debate will go tomorrow. Is it going to give us money or going to lose us money?
Yeah.
Look, let's talk about Scotland. Fascinating argument up there. I genuinely don't know what you're going to say in answer to this question. You're a confident man that the Conservatives are going to do well, but I think you will concede that the Conservatives are not going to win every seat in Scotland.
Not every seat.
In a seat, which is a marginal SNP Labour seat. Which of those two parties would you prefer to win? OK, I
will answer the question, but before I do so, I just want to stress one thing. Firstly, it's a four-party system in Scotland.
Indeed.
And that means that there are some seats, for example, like Edinburgh South, which the Conservatives could win, even though they're not in pole position at the moment. And the reason why I mention that is that the consensus that's emerging tonight is that Ruth Davidson was the standout winner of the debate. So the first thing I would say is, if you believe in Conservative values, if you want David Cameron in Downing Street, and he's more popular in Scotland than Ed Miliband, vote for him. The other thing, though, I would say is that I would never vote for a separatist party, and I would not want to see them succeed.
So you would slightly prefer, I mean, two second-best choices or two least bad choices.
Yes.
The least bad would be Labour, because they are at least a unionist party. You're not left of centre like them, but you would rather Labour than the SNP.
Let me stress, I want everyone who believes in Conservative values to vote Conservative.
Of course.
But you're asking me a question which is about what's in my heart.
Yeah.
In my heart, I would rather have someone who believed in the United Kingdom in the United Kingdom Parliament.
You've been really, really clear about that. And so you would rather, for example, Labour came in with 50 seats in Scotland and the SNP with 9, rather than the other way round, which is what it's kind of looking like it might be.
Well, I can't influence those people who are swithering between Labour and the SNP. What I can do is I can explain to voters on both sides of the border the consequences of having a Labour-SNP coalition. Because the curious thing is that, as we saw from Nicola Sturgeon's pitch tonight, she was saying, if you vote for me, you can have both Ed Miliband in Downing Street and me driving him further to the left. And I think for voters in Scotland and England, who are broadly in the political mainstream, that's a lethal cocktail. They wouldn't want that. And there is an opportunity in this election to vote Conservative in a number of seats in Scotland and to win. It is the case, for example, that in two of the seats the Liberals hold, we're actually more strongly placed to win than the Liberals are, and we are the principal challengers to the SNP.
Right. Now, the reason I asked you about which side you're on, and you've been very clear you'd prefer Labour to do better than the SNP. The reason I ask you is there are a lot of people who think your party is actually, in its actions and in its words, subtly supporting the SNP in Scotland and making life difficult for Labour. And that's a really interesting thing, because that implies that you really want the SNP to win to help you get to Downing Street.
Absolutely not. You know, Labour SNP MPs are interchangeable in the sense that they're on the opposite side to us. You're not going to get Labour MPs or SNP MPs supporting David Cameron in Downing Street. In that sense, we're not trying to big up the SNP, but last week we had to acknowledge the uncomfortable truth that Nicola Sturgeon did well in that debate.
That's what I was going to ask you, because you didn't have to big her up, but you were all coming out and saying, oh, didn't Nicola Sturgeon do well? I suppose Nicola Sturgeon did it. I mean, come on, you know very well that was making life difficult for Ed Miliband.
Ed Miliband made life difficult for himself. As we say in Scotland, facts are shields that win a ding. The fact is that the SNP did well in that debate, in the same way as they did badly tonight. I think the consensus is that Ruth Davidson won Jim Murphy came second. That's the critical consensus.
That's
my take. But to reinforce the point, at this election, I think it's important that we spell out to people that the consequence of an SNP Labour coalition would be not just further movement on the slippery slope to separation, but also more taxation, more borrowing, an end to the welfare cap, and an end to our independent nuclear deterrent.
A lot of people, many in your own party,
yes,
think that stirring up nationalist passion in England about Scottish people coming here and telling Labour what they're going to do in England is going to raise all sorts of passions in Scotland, and particularly anti-union passions in Scotland. So, for example, a poster with Ed Miliband in the pocket of Alex Salmond, that stirs up passions here, stirs up passions about the whole debate. Also, incidentally, tells the Scottish, vote SNP if you want to have power in Downing Street.
What it does is it starkly points out the contrast at this election. A coalition of chaos, if you've got the SNP and Labour together, versus David Cameron. And I don't think anyone can say that David Cameron is playing fast and loose with the union. When he put his reputation on the line in the referendum campaign, campaigned throughout the course of the lifetime of this Parliament, in order to protect the United Kingdom. I don't think there's anyone who can say that David Cameron, George Osborne, myself, William Hague, other members of the team are anything other than dyed-in-the-wool unionists. That's why I'll be campaigning in Scotland during the course of this election campaign, because I want Conservative candidates to win.
OK. Well, anyway, look, you've been really clear that you want Labour to do better. You would vote Labour rather than SNP if that was the choice given to you. Can we talk about the campaign more generally? Are you happy with how it's going? The Conservative campaign I'm talking about, the national campaign, not the Scottish one.
Yes, I am. I'm a qualified optimist.
Right. Because there has been a suggestion that optimism and big vision hasn't had enough of a place in this campaign. I wonder if you feel there will become more room for a bigger, more optimistic Tory message in this. It's been quite narrow.
I'd take a little bit of exception to your premise there, because I do think, actually, we have had an optimistic campaign. If you look back at the party election broadcast last week, it was an optimistic, sunlit message about what we would do if we were given another 5 years for the next generation. Continue with education reform, make sure that there were more opportunities for people to own their own home, providing people with security in retirement. I think that it's fashionable to say that the campaign isn't optimistic. That's the critique of the commentators.
Critique of a lot of your own as well. Well, I've had conversations with them who say, what's going on in our party?
Well, not the people I've been talking to. Okay. I mean, the people I've been talking to, both on the doorstep and also my colleagues, think that we've got the balance right between pointing out that another 5 years with David Cameron as Prime Minister would mean more children in good and outstanding schools, a better deal for pensioners, more home ownership, but also there's a clear choice, and those benefits will be put at risk.
Let me quote. Actually, I'm going to quote you, because I think the most interesting thing I've read from your party is your speech, actually, to the Legatum Institute a month ago, as they launched the Good Right, a movement for a kind of more morally infused right-wing campaign. You said, only if we remind people of our commitment to social justice, demonstrate our belief in equality of opportunity, and affirm that we are warriors for the dispossessed, will we be able to win elections. Are you doing those things to win this election? Because I don't think I can remember hear you stressing your commitment to social justice, demonstrating your belief in equality of opportunity, or affirming that you're warriors for the dispossessed. Or have I just missed it in the Tory campaign?
Well, let me take one area, helping the low paid. Our commitment to increase the income tax threshold to £12,500 is a way of saying to those who are the poorest but working hard in our country, we're on your side. I think that's both optimistic and socially just. I think in education reform, our commitment to have more free schools, schools which will deliberately be cited in areas of educational disadvantage, is another way of saying that we're on the side of the dispossessed. I think that to take an area that doesn't often attract attention, the reforms that we've made to social work and to child protection, which we hope to be able to extend in the next Parliament, they're also there to help the most vulnerable.
These aren't being talked about in your campaign at all. David Cameron can't go out without just using the words competence for him, chaos for everybody else, and Ed Miliband as many times as he can shoehorn it into a sentence.
That sums up, that crystallises the choice. But in this interview, you've given me very kindly the opportunity to provide more detail and background. We have talked about tax. George Osborne was talking about it this morning. No. George Osborne was emphasising this morning. Firstly,
he released a dossier of dodgy dossier of statistics on the other parties' tax plans, and the press conference
you simply say dodgy dossier because it's attractive alliteration.
The press conference turned into a farce. As the journalist said, "Don't tell us about theirs, tell us about yours," and he couldn't answer the question.
Well, it didn't turn into a farce. It reinforced two vital points. One of the points which I've referred to earlier, which is that we will be raising the income tax threshold to help the very poorest. That was the challenge you put to me, and George is meeting it. The other point is that Labour are going to increase taxes overall by a significant sum in order to meet the £30 billion deficit total. Now, the other areas, education reform, Nicky Morgan's going to be saying more about education reform tomorrow. And on the area I mentioned of social work and child protection, it's a passion of David Cameron's, and I think we'll be hearing more about that during the course of the campaign as well.
Are we going to get any mention, can you tell me,
yes,
of the big society in this campaign?
I think it's unlikely that we'll hear the phrase, but what we will see...
Why is that? Why is that?
Because I think that it was a phrase which, before the last election, it wasn't clear in many people's minds. Now, what we will point to are those things which encapsulate the big society. So, for example, National Citizen Service.
It's such a success that we've moved on to the next plan.
Well, we've moved. You know, the whole point is that the words are now concrete realities. And rather than talking about the big society as a concept, we can point to the things which are the fruit of the big society. I mentioned National Citizen Service, a fantastic success story. Again, we'll be hearing more about it.
Why has this not been mentioned? I mean, most people are going to say, what are you even talking about? I've not even heard of this. You haven't mentioned the big society for 3 years. None of us know anything about it. You're saying it's been a success.
Yes.
It's concreted. It's set in stone now. And you can point to the specifics. Why is your campaign not doing that? Look, in the last election...
First of all, I would say that I've just mentioned, because you've given me the opportunity, the success of National Citizen Service.
Well,
we'll hear more about that during the course of the campaign.
I absolutely had to shake your lapels to get you to talk about it.
You don't need to press the toothpaste tube. I'm more than happy to expatiate on at length and to explain what it is, to explain that it brings people from every part of this country together at the age of 16 for a shared experience which involves them then giving back to their community through social action. That is the essence of the big society. The free schools that we've set up, that's the essence of the big society. Charities, individuals, families coming together to provide higher quality educational provision in communities that have had substandard schools in the past.
In the last campaign, actually in the manifesto, the one that had the big society just plastered all over it, in fact, was only about the big society, David Cameron said, real change comes when the people are inspired and mobilised, when millions are fired up to play a part in the nation's future. Are you really suggesting that that is the Conservative campaign this time?
I'm suggesting that we've already shown that millions have been fired up by the changes that we've made, that we have had
fired up to join the SNP, to join UKIP. I mean, come on,
I don't know why you're bringing them into it. I mean, they're the enemies of what we've achieved. What we have achieved is the mobilisation of the goodwill, the charitable endeavour, the social conscience of millions of people in this country. I think it's striking that the number of people who volunteer, the number of people who are committed to working not just in education, but in our hospices, in all manner of voluntary and social organisations, is testament to the fact that we've made it easier by removing some of the bureaucracy that stood in the way, and we've also provided the resources to enable people to transform their communities. And I think it's in the area of education that transformation has been most striking, but it's been across the board. And I think it's true to say that when we look back at our manifesto 5 years ago, we have to look at how far we've come since then. But what we have done is implement not just a transformation in our economy, but also a transformation in our welfare system, in education, and an enhancement of the NHS.
Admire your indefatigability. Michael Gove, thank you very much indeed.